We have a very special panel this evening. So, and I'm thrilled that you're all here. This is extremely surreal for me because many of you are Journey Clinical members, and you see me, I see you in this virtual space, and it's really cool to meet in person and get to connect and hear about all the work that you're doing. And today we're going to hear from four pretty incredible panelists. I'm going to give a quick intro, some background. So I'm Lizzie. I work for Journey Clinical. I serve currently as a community manager. I work in New York City along with our core team. I actually have a little slide. I don't know if Adam, you can do it, but I work with our core team, our co-founders, Jonathan and Miriam, their dog Banksy, and they have a visual. There they are. So Jonathan and Miriam co-founded Journey Clinical. They're actually a married couple. That's their dog, Banksy. And we work together along with a core team in New York. We also have a lot of remote staff. And we have Kwasi here, who's on the Journey Clinical team as well. Kwasi is he deserves a big one. Kwasi is our senior clinician at Journey Clinical. I'm going to give more of a bio on him. I think that's actually it for me. But yeah, I'm going to get into your bios, and then I'm going to ask brief questions and stop talking and let you all talk. So I'll start with Kwasi, let's mention him. Kwasi Adusai is a psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner, co-founder of the Psychedelic Society of Western New York, and led the development of a grassroots psychedelic harm reduction organization called the Sanctuary Project. As an educator and community organizer, he is informed by his experience with the war on drugs and community mental health, both as a patient and as a clinician. He is currently serving on Journey Clinical's medical team as our senior clinician. So in his role, Kwasi cares for Journey Clinical patients through the whole process, the intake, the eligibility assessment, developing personalized treatment plans, follow-ups, outcome monitoring. That's kind of the spiel of our medical side. And he does a lot more than that. He is our spokesperson in many ways. He helps us innovate our collaborative care model. He plays a key role in the development of our protocols. I'm going to try that. Let's see about this one. That one sounds better. Further. So this is better?
Yeah.
I think this is better. Okay. We'll just keep it around. I think, can you hear me all right? It's a little fuzzy, but I think it's going to be great. Is it okay on the camera? Okay, excellent. Okay, wonderful. So thank you, Kwasi, so much for being here. We're about to hear a lot more from him, but we can give a mini round of applause for him. So I'll go down the line here. So Dr. Jody Neudelman is the founder of Ascends Rate Psychology Group, a systems-oriented practice that offers integrative psychotherapy services, conscious executive advising, healthcare organizational consulting, and personal professional support for clinical leaders. Over her career, she has delivered forensic clinical testimony and psychological services in hospitals, universities, communities, schools, and private practice. She has also designed decision support health tech products that facilitate whole person care. Jody sits on various startup and advocacy boards and is passionate about experimental medicine, embodiment and movement practices, and I love this part in your bio, Jody, sustainable collaborative care models that support the transformation of healthcare at scale. Subtle plug there. So, she's more than just that, actually. Jody is one of our most experienced Journey Clinical members. She's been there from the start. If you've ever seen one of her responses to one of the many threads in our member forum, you know just how thoughtful and thorough she is, and she's really a support for my members to educate them and keep everyone on track. So thank you, Jody.
Thank you.
Right, well, we're going to go on to Gwen now. This is the compliment session. So Gwen is an integrative multi-licensed psychotherapist, adjunct professor, clinical supervisor, and certified psychedelic assisted therapy provider and advocate who is passionate about curating spaces for access and conversation in the community. Through her warm and direct approach, she has made it her life's work to help people connect with their own inner healing intelligence and live a meaningful life. She has also developed My Journey Journals, which are creative containers to help you unearth and deepen your personal journey with psychedelic medicine. And I believe we have some over there that are interactive. So on that first table there, you can explore that work.
That's a fun little trick kit, right? And happy to talk to me about as well.
Oh, great.
And I will also show you my journey journal.
Okay, the journey journals.
If you come find me, I'll be happy to show you.
Excellent. Both things. Come meet Gwen and ask her about it. So yeah, the journey journals are written or illustrated expression where you're guided with somatic informed prompts and whimsical art therapy inspired directives that help you dive deeper within, whether in non-ordinary states of consciousness or not. And a little bit about Gwen in relation to Journey Clinical. Gwen serves as our Bay Area ambassador. So we have these ambassadors who help us host events similar to this and also more casual and frequent than this. And Gwen's an amazing community leader. She also hosts events beyond just the Journey Clinical community, fireside chats, half-day retreats. She's really stepped into this leadership role in the community, and she makes events like this possible. And I'd say I wrote a co-conspirator in our mission to expand access and education around CAP. Okay, and last but not least, we have the lovely Melissa Whitlow, who is a writer, researcher, certified yoga instructor, psychedelic psychotherapist, of course, and founder of Diva Collective, which we hope you'll share some more about Melissa. Melissa spent a decade in service in women's health at the UCSF School of Medicine. She's been a lead trainer for psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy programs, and she's taught modules on CAP and women's health for Journey Clinical. Specifically, if you're in our resources, there's an amazing webinar there on perinatal mood and anxiety disorders and CAP. Definitely check that one out. She's also trained in sacred herbalism through the Shipibo Nebo lineage, which provides a cosmology of healing that is matrilineal and guided by the divine feminine. And she's the founder of Diva Collective, so I'm going to share a little bit more about it. A MAPS fiscally sponsored nonprofit that is pioneering psychedelic research for women's health. Her work has been published in the Washington Post, Glamour Magazine, the Journal of Psychoactive Studies, and Frontiers in Psychiatry. She's also been featured in local media such as KPFA in the Bay Area. She also hosts retreats and trainings alongside fellow leaders in the field and Journey Clinical folks such as Sunny Strasberg and Lauren Taus. They also lead trainings for our community. You might recognize those names and faces. So we're really lucky to have a leader like you in our corner, Melissa, and for our members to benefit from your expertise. Okay, so jumping into the questions, I wanted to start with Kwasi. I'm going to ask you a little bit about the collaborative care model in a moment, but I wanted to just ask you first a little bit about how you got into this field. If you could just share your backstory there and what led you to Journey Clinical.
I think the feedback is very cool straight up and down. Oh,
thank you.
Let's get out.
I'm so
It's better. Well, first off, let me just say, can we give a round of applause for Lizzie? Yeah, because I think you hold it down so strongly and so elegantly for the community, which is such an important part of this model and everything that we're doing. So thank you. So in terms of my immersion sort of in the psychedelic space, I think like many of us, it started in college. Own experiences that really led to the recognition that
Should I walk through? Yeah.
You just go shut mine off when you're
Okay.
talking, and you're just gonna have.
experiences where I recognize that these medicines that I'm working with are not purely recreational. And so in school, I think I was an undergrad in nursing school, I started a psychedelic society. And the intention here was twofold. One was to educate the community, but in addition to that, I think that many folks who have experiences with psychedelic medicine find that they're oriented towards a certain level of values where they realize they have to take better care of themselves, they have to take better care of their community, they have to take better care of the world. And so I asked the question, what would society look like if it was more psychedelic? And ultimately, I think the answer was more giving, So we structured our psychedelic society to essentially be a service organization, offered integration services, but also went volunteered at homeless shelters, soup kitchens, and cleanups, while fundraising for different organizations, including VAPS. Ultimately, that led us to working in the festival environment. I was a nurse at the time and volunteered in the medical tent where most of the people I recognized were coming in not because of medical issues, but rather because they were having psychedelic emergencies. And it seemed like there was a very clear opportunity here to develop something that would be supportive of that particular experience that people were coming in with. And so we trained hundreds of community members to hold space for one another, to do peer support. And I think that was really foundational to me to think about what does it look like to elevate community in this conversation, what does it look like to elevate partnership in this conversation, where by training the community to hold space, I think it did a whole lot for changing the conversation around stigma and also, again, on for opportunities towards integration. So I think I went through a bit of a really windy road in my early career and had some experiences with just interactions with the law that, as somebody who was working in the psychedelic risk reduction space, I think often we talk about it like it's harm reduction. I think that's a more common description, psychedelic harm reduction. And I recognized very early on that psychedelic harm reduction is a misnomer because we're implying that psychedelics have inherent harm. And that's certainly not the case. They do have inherent risk. So the question that came up was trying to think about, well, where is the inherent harm coming from? And really the answer there is coming from the policies, the laws that are putting people in prison. In jails, we're working with medicine of not, that induces an unlearned state of consciousness. So I've had opportunities to sense, work at the policy level with California to help with the decriminalization process of the state. And some of the work that I did disseminating our process for this risk reduction program with other organizations, communities around the country, which is actually how somebody had found me at Journey. And they roped me in. They didn't have to tug very hard because I think immediately I recognized this approach to hyperlocal care that empowers the therapists, that provides resources across the board to allow us to do really intentional care made a lot of sense and certainly some of the features.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
So I'm going to keep it on you for a moment, just to give some context. We have a lot of our members here, and we also have a lot of new faces who are here to learn. So I mentioned this collaborative care model, and I was wondering if you would expand a bit on what that looks like on the medical side. What does that look like on a day-to-day?
So I think firstly, I'm going to actually pose this quick question to the audience. Just to show of hands, who has heard of SET and setting? Mostly everybody. Yeah.
Set and set.
Of course, it's one of the first things they hear about in the context of psychedelic medicine. And I always felt like something was missing in that meme, or this clip that we use to identify the qualities important within the context of the psychedelic experience. And I think the word that was missing was support.
Yeah.
So I've evolved personally this meme to setting into work. And I think this is really at the core of what collaborative care looks like. So when we think about collaborative care, we have us on the medical team. We're responsible for, clearing, assessing clients to make sure that they're safe to continue. So that you as a therapist, once you're receiving that client for the work that you're doing, you can feel comfortable and safe in knowing that I can focus within my own scope of practice. I can focus on what I specialize in, what I trained in. I don't have to think about all these other pieces because you're covered, right? And so that's opportunity for us to really operate within our lanes, to support each other, to really allow each other to lead into their uniqueness, their strength, their power, all the, I think, amazing people on this panel, the things that they're doing, and certainly all the things that I'm sure all of you are doing too. It's beautiful when we can operate within our genius, if you will. And so collaborative care allows us to be in partnership, communicate quite a bit through the platform. The team has done a great job with developing means of communication so that we can coordinate care. We have so many people who are behind us, allowing to make sure everything is operating really smoothly. So as we're focusing on some of these more medical pieces, you're focusing on the therapy and the surgery that allows the patient to then focus on doing that very hard work of healing themselves.
Thank you so much, Betsy. I hope that was helpful kind of context on how that's structured in that relationship. And I want to look at the other side of that collaborative care relationship now, which is therapist. And I wanted to ask you, Jody, to kind of give your perspective on this collaborative care model and your role as a therapist in this work.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. There's so much you just said that it's hard to follow. I mean, it's really aligned with, I think, the way that I have felt about Journey Clinical. Just that I made a promise to myself a while ago that I wasn't going to work with or for any organizations or collaborative organizations that did hold themselves to a level of integrity, and to do that in really conscious ways, which is the kind of thing that I'm just conveying to a lot of my clients that are struggling with their own existential issues and very human issues, who are sitting at the top of the food chain in lots of different industries, particularly medicine, healthcare, right? So one of the things that I like to say is that the reason I love Journey Clinical is because a part of this is all about you guys doing the work that you already are doing and doing well, right? There's nothing that the medicine is gonna do magically. It's solid psychotherapy that's doing that work that helps usher people through the portal that Journey Clinical allows access to, and then on top of that, having a collaborative care model that allows us to have conversation with the prescriber in a way that's not all that common in private practice, and it's not always that common in the healthcare system that would like to do that better, but doesn't have a payment model to support that kind of collaboration. The CPT codes are not very well reimbursed for talking to, the psychiatrist talking to the gastroenterologist or the immunologist or the oncologist, So I feel like in terms of a collaborative care model, it really folds nicely into an integrated care model, which is what I'm, passionately activist around, addressing some of the, issues that are endemic to the paradigm of the way we deliver healthcare right now. So, in service to that, I like to work with organizations that embody that and that do that in a way that is scalable. And also, the folks up there and all of you guys that are just searching for a way to practice within your own integrity, right? And to do that at scale, it's very code generating, right? Like it's just a regenerative process. And I personally have benefited just from the exposure to everyone's expertise, right? Like you can't squeeze that into all of your training, but here you have a community that's offering their expertise freely, and it just feels like a gift in a lot of ways. You don't have to go collect all these different CEOs from all these different places. You can, that's great, but they all kind of have a place here in this community where there's also a lot of different levels of support. So as a member of the Council of Therapists, I love hearing feedback that gets translated up the chain, and I can tell you that they listen. Thanks for saying that, Jody. I know, I get to see that every day in New York, of just how much we're all tuned in to things like the forum and hearing this feedback and growing based on feedback. As you know, that's how Journey was initiated, was this group of 20 therapists reached out to Group Fluence listserv, and, they started out and someone said, hey, I need a consent form. And, all right, we're going to create a consent form. And that's how Journey was built. And we're still functioning in that way where your feedback is how we grow and develop. And I know Quasi can speak to that on the medical side of even our protocols. What needs clarifying, what needs adjusting is in constant motion. And startup life is no joke, right? You live in the Bay Area, you throw a stone and hit somebody who's got a startup company, right? So you know that so many of them fail. and it's a lot of all hands on deck, and they've been consistent in receiving feedback and trying to incorporate that in the best way that they can within a model that's sustainable. So I guess I'm also here to kind of hold their feet to the fire in that way too. I think we all are, and so just there's growing pains inside and outside, just like there are in our families and our own lives. We're all just sort of becoming, and that's what's kind of beautiful about this community. It's just super human.
So we've been speaking about this collaborative care model and the relationship involved there, but I also want to talk about another word we love to throw around, which is the therapeutic alliance. We throw it around for a very important reason. And I'll just keep going down the line here. So I want to talk to you, Gwen, about your relationship with your clients and why you're equipped to do that work. And I also want to sort of frame it in this way of, in a place like we're in Berkeley now, or this area where maybe people do have access to psychedelics and many different ways, what would you say to someone who came to you and said, why should I do this with a therapist? I can do it on my own.
Great question. And honestly, the first thing that came to mind was something that we spoke about just now around integrity, and the integrity of also what Quasi you're mentioning in the medicine itself, in what sets apart just taking drugs and being intentional with what it is you're trying to pursue in a healing experience, right? Whether it's a sitter or a coach, we have some contention still between coaches and counselors, and the essence of Journey Clinical, what I always walk away with is that there's room for all of us. What was also mentioned, just that leveraging our own strengths and leaning on each other also highlights the support that ultimately is what people are looking for. So even by asking that question, they're seeking some kind of support to enhance the experience there's such a wide spectrum from psychonaut to novice, especially right now in the psychedelic renaissance, where certain trendy terms are more colloquial in conversation, but also misunderstood. So even just destigmatizing and better informing ketamine itself, right? What actually is it? And that's one of the things that I'm very passionate about too, is just giving information and psychoeducation around preparation, integration, different medicines, and actually, what are you seeking in your experience? So that therapeutic alliance is crucial to support it makes all the difference, because this is such a sacred, intimate thing. This space that we're creating, psychedelics aside, therapy is so intimate. And so when you add psychedelics to the mix, having trust, transparency, integrity, and then doing so partnered with an organization that supports not just the clients, but the colleagues and clinicians who are providing that support to these clients, is a through line that answers your question. Like, that sets it apart. And in my experience with clients who I've worked with for years and maybe have their own stigmas and their own fears, or back to collaborative care, clients' inquiries that more and more I'm noticing the trend of inquiries coming my way from people who already are in their own ongoing therapy with a therapist who they don't want to leave. They feel very strongly supported in their therapeutic alliance, but they want to work with me specifically with ketamine. So branching out that collaborative care model to envelop other psychotherapists to support each other in filling in the gaps and leveraging your strengths. And bless you, Journey Clinical has been just so supportive in, again, like the evolution as an organization to fill those gaps too.
Thanks, Gwen. You started kind of mentioning there about these these outcomes and as you mentioned, the different skill set that different practitioners have and might be able to support person at one given time. So I think that leads into talk to you, Melissa, about your specialty and the folks that you work with and how you support them through ketamine assisted psychotherapy. Love to hear from you about that.
Thank you. And I just want to appreciate what has been shared so far. Really helpful, wise information. It's really important that we come together in community to do this work because we can keep each other accountable and also share and support one another. And the population that I work with primarily is the postpartum population. And I just want to put a note out about language. I have some clients who don't identify as women, even though they biologically gestated and birthed a child. But part of their trauma in giving birth was that the entire medical team kept calling them mama, and that's not how they identify. So I try to be really inclusive. It's a little clunky to talk about birthing bodies, but I feel like it's important if we can try to shift the language to have more inclusivity. So I like to talk about breastfeeding bodies and birthing bodies. And it's pretty controversial still to talk about these bodies taking drugs. And when I did a ketamine training in 2018, I was coming from UCSF and had a massive caseload of we like to say perinatal mood and anxiety disorders because it encompasses the entire fertility period and also pregnancy and the whole year postpartum. And I don't think these lines are so absolute. I think someone can be a couple years out from giving birth and still be struggling. And the first thing that we had to look at was that there was nothing in the literature that looked at the interaction between ketamine and breast milk. So we did a very small study published in the Journal of Psychoactive Drugs that demonstrated that if a birthing and breastfeeding body wanted to safely have a ketamine experience and we're talking about the intramuscular route of administration, and with Journey it's all the oral rapid dissolve tablets, but I think we can make a translation there. Low and slow is my favorite with this population, if you remember nothing else. But with the intramuscular route of administration, the breast milk was completely clean of medicine after 12 hours. So that is something that the entire family unit and care team can plan around, because I feel like it's very important to have wraparound care for the new parents, regardless of whether drugs are involved or not.
Well,
And what I have found with this population is actually postpartum folks who are struggling with depression or anxiety or trauma don't need a lot of medicine. They need a lot of support. And the medicine is one ally in that formulation of support. And ketamine is demonstrated, really wonderful for some folks, rapid acting antidepressant, which can be really, really helpful. And it does require an interdisciplinary team and also a lot of community and family support. So I have found through many anecdotal experiences that this medicine can be really, really helpful for this population. And I'm really honored to be able to steward some of this work and also contribute to the research, because if anybody has done any kind of literature review or search about women's health and psychedelics, there's not much out there. So that was part of my motivation for founding Deva Collective, because we as a society, we really need to take care of our birthing bodies and our breastfeeding bodies and our families, because that leads to better outcomes in the long term. So it's not just about psychedelics or just about therapy, it's really about strengthening these interdisciplinary and community approaches and looking at different wisdom traditions who have carried the feminine through. I mean, I've seen so many people over the years who have really benefited from multiple types of support. And I'm happy that ketamine-assisted psychotherapy is becoming more acceptable Probably you all saw the study that came out, I think either this year or last year out of China, where postpartum folks were given a bolus of ketamine during their C-section delivery, and the outcome was pretty good in terms of reduced numbers of postpartum mood concerns. So there's a lot of hope, and hopefully, if you're interested in research, I'd love to talk to you. And I love Lizzie's amazing, and I met Jonathan through Lauren's house years ago, and I'm really appreciative of models that are promoting access, because a lot of this work is not accessible to the wider populations of people, and we have some really vulnerable people that we're all working with. So very grateful for the work that Journey Clinical is doing, and to be able to have these experiences and opportunities to come together and share and collaborate and support one another, because it's not easy work.
It's really good. Good lady.
Thank you so much, Alyssa. And I definitely invite anyone. We'll have some time at the end to connect. It'd be wonderful that you can ask some follow-up questions to all that rich insight. So I'm going to pass it back to Kwasi now. I wanted to talk to you, Kwasi, about, you see a whole breadth of Journey Clinical patients, and I want to ask you about some of the outcomes you've seen from CAP or you've experienced yourself, anything that you're willing to share.
So, in terms of outcomes, I think maybe a way to start this is just by framing ketamine. I kind of think of ketamine as this mental health chameleon, that it can support so many different, disease processes, what we call disease processes anyway, in a number of really beautiful ways. So, with the outcome conversation, I feel like when we maybe even step back and think about standard psychiatric care, right? We're prescribing SSRIs, it's like life-saving and be beautiful tools for many people. And they're working at the chemical level. And with ketamine, we're working with something that's operating at nerve wire level. And, when we talk about neuroplasticity, these are some of the conversations that we're having. And the end result of that is it allows a really wide breadth of benefits. Some of the clients that I've worked with have had outcomes that they never expected. I, for example, had a client who was being treated for depression, was learning how to play guitar at the time, realized that they were learning how to play more quickly, right? Strange, we never expected, right? But the whole idea here is that this neuroplasticity that we have access to is really global in nature. And so how beautiful is it we have an opportunity to be guided by a therapist in the work that we're doing. So I've had clients tell me that, and I remember this in particular because I think it really spoke to the core of what we do, the core of what we all do as therapists, where the client said that I'm finding that my relationship with my therapist is improving, right? Like I'm feeling closer to my therapist. And we all know that the number one predictor of positive outcomes is the quality of the therapeutic alliance. And so whether or not her anxiety is being reduced, whether or not her depression is being reduced, that relationship that's been formed between her and her therapist by being vulnerable, by allowing her to hold space for her in a space where she's totally unfamiliar with, how that might draw a level of closeness. What is that going to do for the rest of their work together? In a year, in 2 years, in 5 years, in 20 years, And I think that is a really beautiful outcome that's never going to be captured by PHQ-9 or GAD-7, right? And PHQ-9s and GAD-7s drop. So I often, in follow-up appointments, once I prescribe for clients in their initial, and I see the follow-up at Journey, we're measuring all of these different pieces, PHQ-9, their depression skills, or GAD-7, their anxiety skills, Sheehan Disability Scale, which basically measures the impact of their mental health on their day-to-day function. And consistently, we're seeing this direction. And I share it with them. And I've had multiple clients start crying when they see an objective result of their measures drop. Because for so many people, they never realized that there was hope for them. Because they felt really failed by the medical system and mental health system as it stands. Because although all of us are, of course, doing the best thing that we can for our clients, often we're meeting different barriers, whether it's because of insurance issues, because of cost, because the tools that we in a psychiatric world have are really not that effective for some people. that they start to feel like there is no hope for them to move towards a sense of alignment with their values. I also think this is really fundamental to how we experience our relationship to ourselves when we think about mental health. Like the values conversation, I feel if you were to outline what values are defined as, you can think of I value family, I value my health, I value nature. And when people find that their depression is removing them from opportunities to show up for their families, to show up for their communities, to be in nature in the way that they know that they want to be, that dissonance is going to cause a lot of distress. And so one of the outcomes that I think is really beautiful is when people have an opportunity to start aligning with their values, because they're not so depressed anymore. That they can get up, they can go and like let the sun kiss them in the face, right? They can start communicating a little better with their family, with their loved ones. They don't expect this. We call psychedelics these non-specific amplifiers. We allow people to really open to whatever might be up for them. So they might go into therapy thinking, I'm here to work on my childhood trauma. But instead, what shows up for them is I'm realizing that I've not been so compassionate to my partner, right? And so when that comes through and they have this opportunity to really work with that, to then integrate that with their therapist and align themselves with their values, I mean, that's the most beautiful outcome you can see.
You've been with Journey for quite a while now. Your relationships with clients, if you want to touch on some of the experiences you've had with those clients over this time, that's great too. Anything that you want to share?
So there's just so much because it's like the term I made up the word accentuate. Okay, I just made it up because after a lot of permutations, it was a way to become your essential self, to become aligned with who you are meant to be. If you were to unburden from all of your parts, if you were to sort of magic wand away all the little mini traumas that have afflicted you with the parts that kind of interfere and drive the bus of your life, who would you have been otherwise? How can we make ourselves more attuned to our essential natures, to our authentic natures, and who is that person? So that's an invitation to go towards something as opposed to identify with your pathology or the part of you that is pathologizing you. But I think just developing my own identity had to do with all of the experiences in my life that were really driven by justice. I think that was a theme for me. I think in all of this work is that just having an open-hearted empathy for unjustness in the contexts all around me. And I think that's how I started my work in residential treatment with Wards State in the city of Chicago, and working in forensic clinical services and working in SNFs and places where there was just medical, frankly, iatrogenic harm happening from interactions with healthcare, and how the people that are the most impaired have the least access to care, and 25 years ago, 30, oh my God, only 30, I'm aging myself. So 35 years ago, we were not understanding that the nature of trauma, right? We didn't completely have a framework for understanding adverse childhood experiences and the long arm of that. So, I have not met a single person who doesn't have like significant ruptures in their history. So, there's no person out there that doesn't have their own work to do, and that is me included. So, I just feel like it's a democratizing way to guide your own careers. Is just to be able to identify what do you want, what value do you want to bring to your own life, to your own families, to your own colleagues, to the spheres of influence that you have, and I just think there's no substitute for doing that work. And I'm unfinished. Hopefully we all are, but it's nice to evolve along with an organization that's doing the same thing for themselves and proliferating an experience. And I think the word is connection, the word is attunement, the word is interdisciplinary communication, effective communication, conscious leadership of self, and others, and anything that you touch, really, it's so much easier to just be yourself. And it's just so much easier, but it's easy to say that, but it's harder to do that. So this medicine, in some ways, whether it's this medicine or other psychedelic medicines, and I think that the next generation of prescribers is going to need to be our expert partners in nuanced prescribing. So as things unfold in the regulatory spaces and proliferate, whether it's above ground or underground, we have these wise partners that can say, this medicine, this context, this person, this method is advisable for these reasons. And these are the interactions that we understand. And having that partnership, I think, as therapists, you don't have to know it all. You just have to know somebody who does, right? Or several people that do, and then be able to know how to access that network. So that to me is collaborative care and team-based care, and that to me should be the future of all medicine. And I don't know, maybe I'll die before it happens, but I will die trying, right? So that those are the kinds of that's the kind of advocacy work that I would like to do, and why I still remain tether peers. So thank you.
Amazing, Cody. We're really lucky to have you as part of that network expertise. And speaking of networks, we have a networker here, Gwen herself.
I don't know how I ended up on this story.
No, you are such a community leader, Gwen. And I want to ask you about the role that communities play. You have taken Journey Clinical by storm on the community front and really taken advantage of what we have to offer. And I want to ask you about how that experience with the community has supported you in launching your practice.
Okay, I can speak on that. So this month is actually my 1-year anniversary with Journey Clinical. Thank you. And I had just moved back to the Bay Area, back to California. I was living in New York the prior 10 years, even though I'm originally from the Bay. I literally just moved into the apartment that I am still at and joined Journey Clinical, opened my own practice all in the same time frame. Besides my family, I didn't really have a community at all. And especially for work, to feel rooted, to feel supported, to feel like I could offer something to my clients. Journey Clinical has been so pivotal in the rocket ship that this past year has been for me in being able to do what I'm doing now in support of my community. So starting, and I spoke to someone who just recently joined and was feeling a little bit like fire hose of information, of groups, of resources, and oh my gosh, it was such a full circle experience to remember the Hannah, if anyone knows Hannah or has worked with her, she was so patient with me and yes, definitely flooding my inbox. But even that got systematized and upgraded to a forum so that you're not getting an email every single time someone, the integrity with which Journey Clinical has devoted itself to progress, evolution, community, collaboration, and connection has absolutely been such a bedrock on which I've built my practice. And yeah, so everything from the consultation groups to I showed up for a minute. I was at every medical Q&A on Mondays. They used to be on Mondays, and the marketing Q&A, and it was the same information every time, but I was just soaking it all in. And there would also be a new question that would pop up, or I just really immersed myself as much as possible, and I'm seeing it on. So it's working, Lizzie. The models are in, and then seeing everybody up, seeing other people. This was spoken on too in terms of you guys giving you guys the platform. So Journey Clinical giving us support in launching something or stepping into an idea or recognizing and identifying a need, and then also Journey Clinical kind of giving the nice nudge to fill the need. That's how the ambassador program started, right? Like, I didn't ask for that. and then even as that role, right? Like, I see people here who have also stepped up, and I could then support them. Like, not one person has to do it all. Not one person can do it all. So literally the fabric of the community being collaboratively woven together, and Journey Clinical being such a like mama bear energy in providing all of the outlets to do so. It's been such a clinician-focused approach that I really believe in so many ways, because if we're feeling supported and celebrated and empowered, the work that we provide our clients is going to be that much more supported, celebrated, and
Sure.
Nostalgic for me to hear about that. I remember so distinctly the first time you popped up on my screen, and I'm like, who is this? And what Gwen did too, which I think really, I assume helped you along, is asking questions and being like, this is what I need help with, and please, and asking, you know, other Journey Clinical members for support. And that's really how you catapult into it and grow and take the leap into doing this work as well. So I want to talk to you, Melissa, a little bit more about the work that you do. We've mentioned a lot about these resources that we offer, and there's a lot of different specialty areas that our clinicians focus on and that we offer trainings in. And one topic that gets brought up a lot, and I know a lot of our members focus on, is somatic work. And I know that you have that as a big part of your practice, the work you do. So I'd love to just hear on that.
Thank you. You know, a lot of people say you have to feel it to heal it. It's not about, you know, intellectualizing, and a lot of therapy is intellectual. We can talk about a lot of things and understand a lot of things on a cognitive and intellectual level, but our brain is not separate from our body. And certainly with the population that I work with most, it's a pretty big transformation of the physical body to gestate and birth a child. And if the postpartum person is breastfeeding, the body can feel intruded upon or invaded in many ways. And ketamine, as we know, is a dissociative anesthetic medicine. So there can be a distancing from the experience of the body, which can be helpful if there's pain or trauma. But I really like to invite everyone that I'm working with, whether they have been through the birth portal or not, to be in a practice that supports being in contact with the physical body, because there's a lot of information that we carry in our physical bodies. Even today, I have a new person who I started with who is an elder and psychedelically naive, and has an idea of wanting to work with ketamine eventually, has a lot of fear and a lot of anxiety, and came in this morning saying, I don't know why I'm feeling really nervous. And instead of trying to figure it out or trying to explain it away or trying to fix it or change it, I invited her to do some breath work and a guided practice that wasn't specifically like, you know, it wasn't a criticism, well, we have to get you out of that and get you into your body. It was more so an invitation to be curious and compassionate with what she was noticing in her being. And she said afterward, we had a beautiful first session. So many of the people who come to us seeking this transformational work with medicine have tried many, many forms of psychotherapy. And the somatic work I find to be very accessible and supportive when we're working with medicine, because instead of staying with the intellectual understanding, which can be really safe and has its place, the invitation to be in our bodies can be incredibly healing, because it's just all information. I'm noticing something in my belly, or wow, my neck is really tight. I know the ketamine is wearing off because the pain is coming back. Whatever it is, but the body contains so much information. And we're all familiar with The Body Keeps the Score, but I also really like to recommend Resna Monogham's book, My Grandmother's Hands, to people that I work with, because putting our intergenerational trauma into cultural context, I think, can be really a supportive container to the work as well. So that's just a little snippet of the somatic work. And I'm a yoga instructor, so sometimes if people are open to it or interested in it, we might include some actual physical practices that potentiate and enhance and support the work with ketamine. Not during the ketamine experience. Please stay lying down. I've definitely had some people want to move around, and it's like, okay, let's keep you safe. But as part of an integration practice, to involve these body-based connective practices can be really, really supportive for integration of these big ineffable experiences, can provide some grounding.
And we're going to start to wrap up. This has been really incredible to hear from all of you, and I'll bring it back to thank you all in a moment. But I'm going to wrap with Kwasi. I want to ask you if you can share, hope has come up a couple times in this panel. And I want to ask you about your hopes and your expectations and for the space over the next 5, 10, 15 years. 200.
So I guess, one thing that comes to mind is just reflecting back. When I first got started working in the space, and I've had opportunities to contribute to organizations like MAPS and Bethlehem, all these training programs. And quite interestingly, I think consistently everybody who's willing to do these programs would come out saying, "What now? What do I do with this?" And I would say this is probably the first time that there's an answer to that. And Journey Clinical has been a massive part of that answer, developing this infrastructure to allow people to integrate this work into their practices. The future of this field, I think, is really exciting. I'm really happy with what's happened and what we've experienced. I think we're really fortunate to actually just take a moment to mindfulness, honest screeching, to recognize that we're living in a really interesting time.
Yeah.
And the fact that we can say this is the work that we're doing is insane. And I think about it every single day, every day. I think when we have this opportunity to not just treat people in terms of their physical health, to not just treat people in terms of their mental health, but to really look at them holistically, and for us to be able to return back to this spiritual aspect about healing. So, I'm sorry? We're still working on the social, slowly but surely. I think with the entire field as a whole, of course there's a lot that we can learn just from pitching. And I think it's really curious and really interesting that whenever we're working as a society, as cultures, with non-ordinary states of consciousness, there seems to be something that these non-ordinary states demand of us, right? So there's this convergent evolutionary process that no matter which culture, which location, whoever's working with non-ordinary states of consciousness, there's an evolution where we all end up at the same destination. And so if you could have multiple cultures completely isolated from each other, not being able to share any kind of information, but they have access to some of the tools that we're working with, inevitably, what do you think is going to show up? They're going to recognize the value of music. They're going to recognize the value of ritual. They're going to recognize the value of community, right? I think Lauren Taus, one of my favorite descriptions or things that I've heard her say was that psychedelic work is connection sport. And nobody does any sort of sport without a coach, right? And so there's this recognition that we need that guidance. We need you all, we need all of you, right, to support these individuals, support that they're doing. And so I've seen over time, we're working towards this convergent evolutionary process. where even now when we think about some of these IV clinics that will dose an individual and leave them, walk away, there's no music playing, they're in silence. They're there for healing, but it's that they're traumatized. And I've lost count of people who have come to us at Journey Clinical because they had an experience like that. And there was this recognition that we need that support. That's not just set and setting, but the support is really relevant and really important. And so if we can continue to follow this train, when we think about where things are going, we can look to some of these cultures who've been doing it for thousands of years, right? And so I am really excited for within this model of working through collaborative care with ketamine work that we can start returning back to nature with these medicines. That maybe what medicine looks like or these sessions look like doesn't have to be that I'm blindfolded and laying in a couch, but that we're going to be interactive, that we're dancing, that we're tuning into that somatic piece, right? That we're really living in fullness and wholeness of all of the ways that we express ourselves in this world, and that it has to be integrated, right? And so I think that the future of this medicine that we're doing is going to evolve towards that, right? It's going to evolve towards groups because it's not only that it's cheaper, but it's actually even better, that people have better outcomes because they can see themselves and other people. They can realize that their issues are not only their issues, but it's shared, right? All of these pieces that they're like breadcrumbs to what we know has been done and what we realize can also offer us a path forward. Tony Bassos, who's like an NYU researcher, he works with psilocybin up in Europe. He often describes that we're in this like 800-year-long battle, spiritual battle, right? And moving psychedelics forward and doing the research and providing these clinical infrastructure solutions. And I find it to be really beautiful, especially as somebody who's been working in the policy sphere and hitting roadblock after roadblock after roadblock, especially in California, of all places, but that's a different conversation. You know, and so to remember that this is an 800-year-long battle, right? That any step that we're taking is part of the fight. That all of us right now are doing this work in a hyperlocal way for our clients, but we're also doing it collectively. And there's a lot of beauty in that. So I feel like the future of this field, the future of clinical, is to continue changing the way that we think about mental health. The hope is that it's not only going to be what's evolving within the psychedelic space, but what's evolving in society as a whole. What are we learning about how we're doing therapy and medicine that can be applied to how things are being done as a standard? I think a really great example here is if you look at the MAPS studies with MDMA, their placebo response is phenomenal, and we don't talk about that. Why is it that people who have treatment-resistant PTSD through these trials with an inactive placebo are getting better? Because they're being given time, because there's multiple people who are involved in this process, because they're being cared for in a way that they have not been cared for before, because they have an hour with somebody who is being rushed because they're overwhelmed by the system, they're overwhelmed by all the suffering, and they want to be able to show up and help, they're getting burnt out, right? And so when we start thinking about how we can make an evolution, it's not just about how we're evolving psychedelics, it's also about how we're evolving all of mental health care as a whole. And again, returning back to this bio, psycho, social, spiritual model of care.
Phew. I can't follow that up. That was unbelievable, Kwasi. Thank you for voicing that for all of us so eloquently, as you always do. And I'm going to follow it up with a little piece of news just on the topic of access. So we're talking about this care that's so important. And I'd be remiss not to mention a very exciting piece of news from Journey Clinical is that we've recently launched with Aetna Insurance in New York and California for the medical aspect of the treatment. And this is a huge, huge, huge step and the beginning of hopefully a big momentum towards access and insurance coverage so that more people can afford this treatment and get support from incredible clinicians in relationship, such as these up here and such as all of you. So I'm unbelievably grateful. I'm just in every direction right now, but thank you all so much. This was unbelievable. I learned so much from all you all, and I speak to you all the time, so I learned way more. And I just want to give you all a round of applause.